A murder coming out of nowhere that took place at a wedding reception, the perpetrator being the brother of the bride, a violent repeat offender who murdered an OAP for a box of cornflakes, and 8 other shocking murders. Let's go.
Yeah. So we'll leave that there. What the fuck? I haven't murdered nobody.
Yes, sir. Suspicion, yeah?
Suspicion? I haven't killed no one. What are you talking about?
Sir, you've been cautioned.
On the 6th of May 2025, 59-year-old Peter Augustine battered to death 87-year-old John Mackey in Seven Sisters Road, Manor House, North London, for a box of cornflakes, a pint of milk and a saveloy sausage. At about 5 p.m. on the said date, John Mackey, a frail man who walked with a stick, left his flat and made his way to the Co-op in Seven Sisters Road. He bought a box of cornflakes, a pint of milk and a copy of the Daily Mirror. Then he made his way to a takeaway shop and bought a saveloy sausage and some chips. He packed everything away carefully in his black hold-all bag before making his way slowly back towards his flat. Augustine watched Mr. Mackey all the time that he was in the takeaway shop. The man told the jury of his trial that he was hungry and wanted a kebab. He had thought of going in and just grabbing one and running away, but there were police cars about, so he decided not to do that. If I've got you hooked on the video so far, viewer, do subscribe, give the video a like, drop a comment when you're ready and donate. Hit the thanks button below. I'll appreciate you. I don't think he would have been able to do any such thing anyway, because they don't leave kebabs ready-made in places where a person can just grab and go, unless this was an exceptional kebab shop where they do that. Anyway, instead of doing a grab and go, the perpetrator follows John Mackey for some distance as he made his way home. He waited until John entered a secluded space in the park that was ringed with hedges, and then he pounced on the poor old man. There were no witnesses to the start of the attack, but there were witnesses who saw the later part of it. They described seeing Augustine punching Mr. Mackey repeatedly with considerable force, and one of them heard the man shouting, "Give me the bag! Give me the bag!" Another also saw what he described as a stomping movement by Augustine as he stood over John Mackey. John had suffered multiple areas of impact trauma to the head, neck and body. He had external bruising and abrasions, deep muscle bruising, 2 rib fractures and a bleed on the brain. He died from his injuries on the 8th of May 2025. The judge of Augustine's trial said that she thinks that what happened was that Augustine tried to grab John's bag, but John hung onto it, and that made Augustine really angry, leading him to start battering the poor old man with such extreme force, far more than what he needed to use in order to steal the bag. So it became not just an act of robbery, it became an act of revenge. Augustine's conduct during the trial demonstrated that he is a man incapable of controlling his temper. He refused to attend the trial for much of the time, but when he was in the courtroom, he was disruptive, shouting angrily from the dock on a regular basis. He was insulting, abusive and aggressive when prosecution counsel attempted to challenge his account of events. His behaviour was so extreme that after repeated warnings, the judge had to take the rare step of kicking him out of court, despite the fact that the man was in the middle of giving evidence. The man didn't come to court for his sentencing, alleging that he had severe back pain. He gave that same excuse on various days during the trial because, as I've mentioned, he skipped a lot of days. However, repeated inquiries with the healthcare unit at HMP Belmarsh confirmed that the man's back pain was being controlled by painkillers and that the man was fit to attend court. The antagonist clearly just didn't want to go.
The defendant's decision not to attend may in fact be some relief to the family of John Mackey, because the defendant's disruptive conduct during the trial was, I know, a source of great distress to them.
In the course of the trial, the defendant's legal team arranged for him to be assessed by a psychiatrist, but you'll never guess what, Augustine refused to go to the appointment. There's nothing in the man's medical records to show that he has ever been engaged with any form of mental health services. The perpetrator was born on the 25th of October 1966. When he was much younger, he was convicted of offences involving serious violence, including robbery and causing grievous bodily harm with intent. He wasn't convicted of any further offences for more than 2 decades, But since 2016, he's been convicted of racially aggravated public order offences, assault, criminal damage and theft. John Mackey had lived in North London for 70 years and was well known locally for his trademark trilby hat, his close family relationships and his love of Arsenal Football Club. Speaking of close family relationships, John Mackey had no children of his own, but he had 22 nieces and nephews who adored him. His niece, Patricia, spoke on behalf of all the nieces and nephews in court, saying, quote, "Uncle John was the perfect uncle. Funny, charming, mysterious, and definitely mischievous. He always had a twinkle in his eye, dressed immaculately, and was never seen without one of his many trilby hats. He was interested in our lives, taking us to see his beloved Arsenal or introducing us to the pups of his home patch, Manor House in Finsbury Park. Family was everything to John. He was never happier than when he was with his brothers and sisters, as he was one of 11. There was always so much laughter and storytelling when they were together." In her sentencing of the perpetrator, the judge, Sarah Whitehouse KC, was scathing towards the man.
There are very significant aggravating factors present here. The robbery is an aggravating feature of the murder. John Mackey was particularly and obviously vulnerable because of his age and limited mobility. He was also in the early stages of Alzheimer's disease. I have no doubt that the defendant targeted him specifically because he was frail. It was a cowardly attack. The defendant has shown no remorse. Excessive violence was used against John Mackey. He must have suffered pain and fear during an attack that lasted for several seconds and which was accompanied by loud shouting on the part of the defendant, such as he displayed in court in the course of the trial. The defendant's previous convictions for offences involving violence are an aggravating factor, although I bear in mind that some of them were committed many years ago, and none of them is as grave as this attack. There is little in the way of mitigation. I cannot be sure that the defendant intended to kill John Mackey, but punching a frail elderly man, especially to the head, is inherently very dangerous, and so there is little mitigation in that. The robbery falls into the highest level of culpability because very significant force was used by the defendant. The harm caused is also plainly at the highest level. The starting point, if the robbery stood alone, is accordingly 8 years, with a range of 7 to 12 years imprisonment. The defendant falls to be sentenced today for murder and for robbery. He has also been committed to this court for sentence for a separate offence of theft, having been convicted in his absence in the magistrate's court. The simple facts of that matter are that on the 3rd of May of 2025, the defendant stole a backpack containing a mobile telephone while its owner was playing baseball a short distance away. The sentence I passed for the theft committed on the 3rd of May of 2025 is one of 4 weeks imprisonment. The sentence I passed for the robbery of John Mackey is one of 8 years imprisonment. Those two sentences have been taken into account in setting the minimum term for the offence of murder.
On the 28th of November 2025 at the Old Bailey, Peter Augustine got life with a minimum of 23 years.
On the afternoon of the 27th of December in 2023, Chris Marriott went for what should have been one of many walks with his young family over the Christmas period, but he never came home. His life was tragically and violently cut short as he stopped to help a woman laid in the road.
In December 2023, Hassan Jhangur, 25, murdered Chris Marriott when he deliberately rammed his car into a crowd of people during a brawl at his sister's wedding reception in Burngreave, Sheffield. He literally made his sister's wedding a blood wedding. The incident took place in College Court in Sheffield, where the groom's family live, and the groom's family are the Khans. When I reference anyone with the name Khan, I'm talking mainly about the adult children rather than their parents. The two families, the Jhangurs and the Khans, were basically feuding, even though they had members of their family who were about to get married. But that was exactly what the feud was all about. Both families were happy about their respective son and daughter tying the knot, but they were locked in a nasty battle over, You're never going to believe this. The date and venue of the wedding. Prior to the wedding, Amani had argued with her mother, Areece Jhangur, shortly before Hassan Khan, her husband-to-be, arrived to collect her from Whiteways Road. In the event, none of Amani's family attended the wedding ceremony, which for me speaks to the anger and resentment that Amani's family, the Jhangurs, were feeling towards either their daughter or their soon-to-be in-laws or both. After the wedding, Amani and Hassan went back to the Khan family home to celebrate with other members of the Khan family. Hassan Khan himself went out for a while with his brother Hussein. While they were out, at about 1 p.m, Areece Jhangur, that is Amani's mother, drove over from her home to the Khan family's home area, first of all with her son-in-law, not Hassan Khan but another one, and then a second time with Nafisa, her daughter, Amani's sister. On each of the two occasions, upon arrival in the close, Areece Jhangur took out from the boot of her car black bin bags containing Amani's clothes and belongings and threw them onto the driveway of number 1 College Court, the Khan family home. Riyazat Khan and other members of the Khan family came out of the house and an argument ensued between Riyazat Khan and Areece and Nafisa, the Jhangurs. This developed into a physical fight, basically, in the course of which Nafisa was knocked to the ground. On receiving news that his sister had been assaulted, Hassan Jhangur armed himself with a lock knife and drove to College Close and accelerated up the hill at speed. Seeing Risa Khan standing in the road in front of Nafisa and the other helpers, he deliberately drove into him before running over the group on the ground, trapping both Chris Marriott and Nafisa, his own sister who he had come to avenge, under the car and seriously injuring others. Chris Marriott suffered catastrophic injuries and died at the scene, having come along only to try to break up the fight and just calm everyone down. He was literally being a good Samaritan, a concerned member of the public. Moments later, a chaotic fight erupted. As people rushed into the street, Hassan Jhangur briefly remained in his crashed vehicle before getting out and confronting members of the Khan family. Hassan Khan arrived carrying a baseball bat and in the ensuing fight, Hassan Jhangur stabbed him multiple times, causing serious injuries. Shortly after the stabbing, Mohammed Jhangur, Hassan Jhangur's father, arrived in a taxi. Before police arrived, Mohammed took the knife off his son and hid it in his own car. However, police officers soon found it. Emergency services worked to free those trapped under the car. In addition to Chris Marriott's death and murder, multiple victims, including Alison Norris, Rizat Khan, Areece Jhangur and Nafisa Jhangur, sustained severe or life-threatening injuries. Hassan Jhangur was arrested and charged with murder, as well as a number of other offences.
Real hand. Yeah, but I opened the window, he's broken my window though. Right, stand there. I've opened the door,
You don't have to say anything, but it may have your defence to do without mention. When questioned, something which may around in court, anything you do to me,
I'm behind your back.
I'm behind your back. 6-1 Tango, I've got one detained for driving this vehicle.
Brad, knife.
Got it.
I can confirm that Amani and Hassan Khan are still married today. What I can't tell you, however, is whether Nafisa Jhangur and her mother Areece are speaking to Hassan. Their Hassan, that is. In his subsequent trial, Hassan Jhangur was found guilty of murder plus other offences including wounding with intent. As you might imagine, the judge was full of reproach and condemnation for Hassan Jhangur.
As regards aggravating features of this offence, first, the use of the car as a weapon on the spur of the moment to commit the murder is a serious aggravating factor which warrants a substantial increase to this starting point. Secondly, the fact that Chris Marriott, a passerby, was engaged in the public-spirited and selfless act of assisting a young woman who was lying apparently unconscious in the street is a further aggravating factor of the offence. Moreover, the two further offences of wounding with intent and the 3 offences of causing grievous bodily harm with intent in relation to the 4 others that you hit with your car, that is Riasat Khan, Alison Norris and your mother and your sister, and the stabbing of Hassan Khan, warrant a further substantial increase in the minimum term.
Chris Marriott's widow and children are understandably devastated by the loss of their husband and father respectively.
Bryony misses his smile, his laugh, his touch, his wisdom and his encouragement. He was her best friend and she's thankful to have loved him and to have been loved by him.
On the 6th of November 2025, Hassan Jhangur was sentenced at Sheffield Crown Court to life with a minimum of 26 years. His father, Mohammed Jhangur, was separately convicted of the offence of perverting the course of justice, coming from his act of nicking the knife off his boy and trying to hide it, and he got a 6-month sentence, suspended for 2 years.
No, he's assaulted me. No, he's assaulted me. No.
Right, okay.
No, he's assaulted me.
It's just a suspicion.
No, I don't care. It's just meaning his word against it.
Right.
This is 38-year-old Craig Howse from Heaton in Newcastle, North East England, reacting to being arrested for the murder of his friend and house guest, Michael Craig. The murder took place on the 5th of March 2025.
Because I've still got you in cuffs, man. You're going to stay in cuffs, okay? So you don't have to say anything. May harm in defence if you don't mention one question. Something which will later on court. Anything do you say, maybe given evidence. The time being, I'm going to have to wait for other officers to get here first, right? That's just the information I've got. There's a suspicion that you've potentially assaulted him.
No, he's assaulted me. No, he's assaulted me. No.
Right, okay.
No, he's assaulted me.
It's just a suspicion.
No, I don't care. It's just meaning his word against it.
Right, yeah.
I haven't assaulted him. He's assaulted me, right? So he didn't start seeing...
On the 5th of March 2025, at his home address, Craig Howse suddenly attacked his friend Michael Craig, bashing him with a vacuum cleaner pipe, stabbing him with 2 knives and a fork, and whacking him with a clock and a mug. In a final degrading act, as Michael lay bleeding but still alive, Howse inserted the vacuum pipe into the man's bottom. In total, the perpetrator inflicted as many as 90 injuries on his friend, using all of 6 weapons. Michael's multiple injuries were mainly to his face and neck, but he also had some to his arm, back and bottom. There were both blunt and sharp force injuries to his body, and his skull was fractured in at least 3 places. All these injuries caused the victim to suffer both the huge blood loss and the cardiac arrest from which he died. The Hoover pipe with which the murderer repeatedly struck Michael was left bent and with the end flattened, while one of the knives that the man used on his victim broke from its handle, while the other was bent out of shape. The mug and the clock that the antagonist also used on his victim both broke as well. Quite shockingly, the judge of Howse's murder trial deemed that the murder wasn't sadistic. In reference to Howse's act of pushing a Hoover pipe into Michael's anus while he was still alive but bleeding on the floor, he clarified that, quote, "This was not sadistic or sexual. This was to retrieve the Kinder egg and the drugs within it," unquote. I can't answer the question of why Michael Craig had any such thing in his bottom hole. Vulnerable in some way, but no less kind-hearted, Michael Craig was, to remind you, a guest in Craig Howse's Heaton flat when he was subjected to the horrific and prolonged and ultimately fatal attack from his friend. In court, Catherine Craig, Michael's sister, told of her personal anguish over her brother's murder, relating that, quote, "To lose a loved one at any time is difficult, but the added factors of Michael's age and the circumstances surrounding his death compound the distress and emotions far more than we can explain. The memory of receiving that first phone call to tell me that not only was my brother dead, but he had been murdered will never leave me," unquote. Why did Howse do what he did to his friend? According to the trial judge, there was no history of animosity between the 2 men, and after all, Michael was a guest staying with Craig Howse in his home. Howse's violence towards his friend just completely rose out of the blue. The judge rejected Howse's claim that Michael had called him either a nonce or a baby killer, and implied that it shouldn't have bothered him if his friend had actually called him those things, since he is neither. As regards House's character, as the judge said, it's a matter of legal record that the perpetrator is no baby killer or paedophile. His previous convictions are for child cruelty and battery, and he murdered his friend whose full trust he held after taking a cocktail of spice, crack and alcohol. Even so, in his defence, the man's barrister, Nicholas Lumley KC, said that Howse is now free of drugs and added that, quote, "Insofar as someone who denies guilt is remorseful, he is. He knows he has taken the life of another person and someone he was on very friendly terms with, and that will never leave him. He is not without insight," unquote. On the 21st of November 2025 at Newcastle Crown Court, Craig Howse got life with a minimum of 20 years.
You hit her on the head with a hammer, doing so multiple times. You put down the hammer and took a knife from the kitchen and stabbed her 8 times.
Chloe and Joshua Bashford, who came from New Haven, South England, were a happily married young couple with 4 children whose ages were 15, 12, 7 and 4. Chloe was 30 and Joshua was 33, meaning, of course, that Chloe became a mother at 15. Around 12:16 on the 9th of June 2023, someone in the family home whacked Chloe on the head several times with a hammer, and then, while she was no doubt incapacitated by the blows to her head, the attacker put the hammer down and took a knife from the kitchen and stabbed her 8 times, 5 times to her upper back and 3 times to her abdomen. 2 of the stab wounds penetrated to a depth of approximately 20 centimetres. Photographs of the room in which her body was found show extensive blood staining on the floor and furniture. The cause of Chloe's death was multiple stab wounds, which led to unsurvivable blood loss. Joshua arrived home from work a few minutes later at approximately 12:20 p.m. The same attacker chased him upstairs, slashing his back with a knife. Then, in the master bedroom, the attacker stabbed Joshua 4 times to the front of his body. 1 of the stab wounds penetrated to a depth of 12 centimetres. As Joshua was dying from the stab wounds, the attacker put the knife down, got a rope from somewhere and strangled the man to death. And indeed, the cause of Joshua's death was stab wounds and compression of the neck. The double murderer was Derek Martin, Chloe's 64-year-old stepdad, who had no previous history of violence. After the fatal attacks, the man cleaned up the knife and some of the bloodstains. He then went to pick up the younger children from school and told the older children to meet him at Costa Coffee. After buying all the children drinks, he took them to McDonald's for food before dropping them off at their grandmother's house, the house of his ex-wife. Their grandmother hadn't been expecting them. At approximately 6:50 p.m, Martin handed himself in at the police station. Why did Martin do what he did? Martin suffers from a recurrent depressive disorder stemming from his abusive childhood. He has a history of contact with mental health services, including hospitalisation, along with several serious attempts at suicide, the man having, additionally, been in and out of prison for much of his life, mainly for thieving. Sometime before the 9th of June 2023, the perpetrator had lent Chloe and Josh £1,500 to go towards home improvements and a new car. Chloe and Josh were meant to be paying him back a certain amount every month, but they'd since fallen behind with the payments. Now, we're probably all sitting here thinking, oh, come on, don't tell me he murdered 2 people who were his own family, basically, over 1,500 poxy quid? Come off it. The hammer that the perpetrator used on Chloe wasn't from Chloe's home. It was the perpetrator's own, and he'd been carrying it with him because he'd been planning to do a burglary later on that day because he was desperate for money. Martin was a heavy gambler. It was an addiction, and it had got him into £8,000 of debt that he just couldn't see a way out of. On the 9th of June 2023 in Chloe's home, he aggressively demanded his money back from her. Chloe's response was that he should just not bother with her or her family anymore. This enraged the perpetrator, not just because it meant that he obviously wasn't getting his money back from her anytime soon, but also because it made him feel used. He'd been, for many years, a really important and helpful figure to Chloe's family, and it looked to him at that moment that all along Chloe had never respected him and never truly valued him. In other words, as I say, she'd only ever been using him.
In August 2023, you pleaded not guilty to murder, but guilty to manslaughter on grounds of diminished responsibility. This is a partial defence to the charge of murder. Where it applies, it reduces what would otherwise be an offence of murder to an offence of manslaughter. Your plea was not ultimately accepted by the prosecution, and you stood trial for the murders of Chloe and Joshua. During the course of your trial, the jury heard evidence from 5 consultant forensic psychiatrists. All the psychiatrists agreed that any loss of self-control on your part was hard to reconcile with your use of different weapons during both attacks and with the second killing, that of Joshua. By their verdicts, the jury rejected the partial defence of diminished responsibility as available to you and considered you should bear full responsibility for your actions. By their verdicts, the jury must be taken to have accepted the psychiatric evidence of Professor Blackwood. He told the court that the precise motivation for your attacks on Chloe and Joshua is known only to you. You yourself have spoken of a row between you and Chloe about money, which culminated in her telling you to leave. However, this is your account and cannot be verified. Professor Blackwood went on to tell the court that something happened on the morning of the 9th of June 2023 that was intolerable to you and enraged you and caused you to fatally assault 2 adults using different weapons. Your attacks were driven by rage and resentment.
On the 6th of November 2025 at Brighton Crown Court, Derek Martin got life with a minimum term of 29 years, minus the 3 years that he'd been held on remand before then. He will be 93 if he lives that long before he can apply for parole.
And during that time, I found that this woman is nothing short of a monster. And this is the exact dimensions of the box in which she was killed. And I wanted people to be able to see what that looked like, what Crystina did to this child, placing this child in this box through fear and coercion.
There were many other cases that come from the UK that I could have brought you, but I came across this case and I just had to share it with you. And Crystina Schroer started forcing the 3 little girls that she and her husband chose to adopt into boxes and perpetrating other acts of cruelty and violence against them almost the minute that she and her husband became their legal parents. Crystina and Joseph Schroer, who come from Rose Hill in North Carolina, USA, had a household that included biological, foster and adopted children. In November of 2019, the Schroers adopted 5 girls, including one called Natalie Marie Garcia, who was born on July the 14th, 2014, and who the Schroers renamed Kennedy Schroer. Kennedy was adopted with her 2 sisters. Almost straight away, the 3 little girls found themselves being forced to lie motionless in closets, dog crates, boxes or plastic storage containers as a punishment for moving around in bed at night. There were, in fact, multiple interior and exterior cameras installed in the home to alert Crystina Schroer of any movement, especially of the adopted children. The perpetrator fed her adopted children mouldy or physically stepped on bread, this act demonstrating the intimidation, favouritism and deprivation that the perpetrator employed to maintain obedience. She created a system as such where the children were pitted against one another, even for survival. She isolated her children from the outside world, removing them from school in favour of homeschooling, and never had any fear of her children misbehaving in any way when they did have contact with the public, because they were terrified of her and she knew it. On Halloween of 2020, Crystina shoved Kennedy into a reinforced cardboard box as punishment for moving around in bed the previous night. She also added blankets and objects inside the box, decreasing the space and air supply while increasing the temperature. Kennedy's sister, who we'll call Brenda, was assigned to watch and ensure that Kennedy didn't move for at least 10 minutes. Sometime later, Brenda came out of the room crying, believing that her sister had died. When the antagonist kicked the box, Kennedy, who was dead, fell out. The woman subsequently placed Natalie's body, or Kennedy's body, Natalie Kennedy, it's the same girl, into her vehicle and drove around for several hours before ultimately returning home and burying Kennedy's body in 2 trash bags in a shallow grave right outside her master bedroom window. After initially reporting to her household that she had taken Kennedy to hospital, the perpetrator announced soon after that, having found the 6-year-old uncontrollable, she had sent her to live in a psychiatric facility. The woman repeated this falsehood over and over to relatives, friends and authorities for years. Despite early reports of possible abuse, Schroer's manipulation and control led investigators and family members to believe her accounts. Her accounts were always consistent. Following Natalie's death, however, Schroer's abuse of the remaining children grew even more horrific. Notably, from this point on, the woman started inflicting physical beatings on the children. She suspended them by the wrist. She stabbed them with sharp instruments. She starved them, or if not, fed them mouldy or contaminated meals, a lot like before. The children's health deteriorated severely, their weight falling to worrying levels. It's obvious that the perpetrator wasn't caring for any of her adopted and fostered children out of love. The woman used these substantial payments that she received for fostering and adopting to fund her overwhelming gambling addiction, which caused her $1 million debt. Police launched a murder inquiry in relation to Kennedy in September 2024 when, on attending the woman's home in response to her threats to harm herself, the reasons for those threats being unclear, they were given reason to suspect that a child from the household had been murdered. I can't explain why the perpetrator's husband failed to stop the perpetrator's cruelty, or why he, of all people, fell for his wife's explanation for Kennedy's sudden disappearance. But having pleaded no contest to his charge of aggravated child endangerment, on the 3rd of December 2025, the man was sentenced to 50 days in prison, followed by 4 years of probation, which basically means a 4-year suspended sentence. If you're thinking, please tell me that's a joke, that's literally just a slap on the wrist, it doesn't reflect the enormity of his failure to intervene and stop his wife doing what she did to Kennedy and the other kids under her care. Exactly.
While Joseph Schroer was apologetic, saying that he was spineless not to stop the abuse at the hands of his wife, Crystina Schroer, that did not convince the judge to soften his sentence. Joseph was given the maximum sentence on all charges, equaling 4 years of probation and 58 days in the county jail. On top of that, he is no longer allowed to contact anyone under the age of 18, including his own children. The judge said he wasn't sure that that was a harsh enough sentence for even his passive role in Kennedy named Natalie Garcia-Edbert's death, and the family agrees.
Schroer will also pay more than $14,000 in restitution. He started his jail time when proceedings were finished.
On the 12th of November 2025, for the murder of Kennedy Schroer, Crystina Schroer got just under 18 years.
So you understand what has gone on. Yeah. Your face has been released in the news under a murder investigation, all right? So at this time of the moment, it's 1950, you are under arrest for murder, okay?
At the New Year fireworks display in Primrose Hill, North London on New Year's Eve 2023, 16-year-old Areece Lloyd-Hall stabbed to death 16-year-old Harry Pittman after a row broke out when Harry accidentally bumped into another teenager while playing a game. Harry and friends had gone to Primrose Hill together and had been in high spirits, drinking and smoking cigarettes. Before the attack, Harry had been speaking to random members of the public and a police officer on duty in the park. But frivolity turned swiftly to tragedy when Harry was playing a game with a friend by trying to see how high he could kick. He was aiming at the hand of one of the girls nearby, which she was holding up in the air. He became unbalanced and knocked into one of the group behind them. The teenager who had been bumped into reacted angrily, and his friend, Lloyd-Hall, who was there with his girlfriend, his sister and a small group of friends, then waded into the fight that subsequently broke out. The streets of Primrose Hill were filled with cars and pedestrians on the night as Londoners of all ages came out to mark New Year. Harry, who grew up in Tottenham and was a pupil at St Thomas More Catholic School in Wood Green, had stepped in as a peacemaker earlier in the evening when one of his friends, who was drunk, got into an altercation with another person. This poor young man just was not a violent person. He liked peace, not violence. Lloyd-Hall, who comes from Westminster, discarded the knife and his clothes and his phone after doing what he did. However, he left behind the sheath to the knife, which had his DNA on it. From the sheath, it was determined that the knife was most probably a hunting knife with a 15-centimetre blade, the perpetrator having been carrying it in his waistband. Having bought the knife from a friend of his a few weeks before, in fact, Lloyd-Hall had since got into the habit of carrying it on the street as it made him feel powerful and invincible. In court, the youth denied that that was his reason for carrying the weapon in public, claiming rather that it was for protection against violence from others, even saying that he especially needed it on the night in question since he'd been planning to go to Camden Town later to see another fireworks display and knew that there were gangs in the area. The judge, though, Mr Justice Kavanagh, counter-argued that the youth didn't live anywhere near that area and had no reason to think that he would be a target of gang violence. The judge also asserted that, quote, "You stabbed Harry because you lost your temper with him and you acted like a big man in front of your friends," unquote. And he also said that the perpetrator didn't care if Harry lived or died in the moments after the stabbing.
You claimed at trial that you stabbed Harry in self-defence and in defence of your sister and your friends. The jury has rejected this defence. At the time when you inflicted the blow, your sister and friends were no longer in any danger from Harry. You were under no great threat. You had just received one flailing punch. In any event, even if you had felt under threat, it was grossly disproportionate to stab Harry with a knife, let alone in the neck. He was unarmed, and you confirmed in your evidence that you had no reason to think he had a knife or other weapon. You could simply have gone backwards out of reach. You could have approached one of several police officers who were nearby for help, or you could have run away. You stabbed Harry because you lost your temper with him, and you were acting the big man in front of your friends.
Jurors were no less told that Lloyd-Hall had attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, ADHD, and was suffering from cannabis-induced paranoia. The boy may also have suffered post-traumatic stress disorder triggered by witnessing the aftermath of an earlier stabbing and the loss of a friend to knife crime in June 2023, the same year then, and the judge himself actually alluded to that point. In mitigation, defence barrister David Bentley KC refers to a handwritten letter from Lloyd-Hall in which he had said, "I'm sorry for causing this, I honestly am." Mr Bentley said, he's not going to say it's not his fault. He now realises that at 16 he was a naive, immature, stubborn teenager who should have been seeking help for his problems. He also recognises that he has not only caused terrible trauma to Harry's family, but also to his own family. The judge paid a heartfelt tribute to Harry, describing him as boisterous and exuberant and somebody who was full of charm.
Harry was an affectionate young man with strong family values and morals. Harry was the heart and soul of his family, full of fun, with a radiant smile and unwavering positivity. His infectious laughter and boundless energy filled the family home with joy, and he was adored by his parents and by his siblings. He had a big heart and was a natural entrepreneur. As I've said, Harry was very popular, and his warm and outgoing personality meant that he had many friends, including a tight-knit group of lifelong friends.
On the 10th of November 2025 at the Old Bailey, Lloyd-Hall got life, which for those whose offence came before they turned 18 is called detention at His Majesty's pleasure, and his minimum term is 16 years.
Terrified what I've done.
I know.
I'm terrified.
Mate, I know.
No, I know I'm going to prison. I know I'm going to prison.
This is Stephen Bates from Liverpool. He's just run over the brother of his very young girlfriend and killed him. This is his response.
I'm going to prison.
Mate, we've got to establish what's happened first, all right? Okay, so...
Hello, caller. You through to Merseyside, please?
Yeah, I've ran somebody over. We had an argument and then I ran him over. I've done the crime, I know.
Come here a second.
Fucking nothing wrong here.
You do not have to say anything, but
yeah.
no harm defence. If you don't mention now, something you later on in court. Anything you say maybe no.
Terrified what I've done.
I know.
I'm terrified.
Mate, I know.
No, I know I'm going to prison. I know I'm going to prison.
On the 18th of April 2025, Stephen Bates, aged 42, drove his Ford Fiesta directly into his girlfriend's brother, 47-year-old Martin O'Donovan, who he met for the first time on this same date, on Stonyhurst Road in Walton, Liverpool, killing the man. This happened in front of Martin's family during none other than a party. Martin's mother, Susan O'Donovan, had just turned 70 and she was being given a party to celebrate in her daughter's home, her daughter, Susan Lucy, being Stephen Bates' girlfriend. This was the first time that Bates had been introduced to Susan's wider family, and he was initially getting on well with the other guests, especially with Martin, who was an avionics engineer and a skilled outdoorsman, whatever that means, who at this point was actually living in Birmingham. However, as the day wore on, Susan became concerned that her boyfriend was becoming a drunken nuisance and suggested that he should leave. John Benson KC, who prosecuted the case, told the jury that Bates became nasty and irate towards Susan when she tried to stop him from driving due to his being drunk. As a result, Susan asked her brother to have a word with Bates, as the two men had appeared friendly earlier that evening. What actually happened though was that the two men began to argue and they got into a fight, Martin punching Bates. Suzanne and her sister, Natalie O'Donovan, broke the fight up, and Bates was eventually persuaded to let Natalie drive him home in his car. During the 12-minute journey, according to Natalie, Bates was seething and he made threats that he would kill Martin, you know, the brother of the woman who's kindly driving him home in his car because he's too drunk to drive himself. When Natalie stepped out of the vehicle, intending to get a taxi back to her sister's home, Bates tricked her into giving him his car keys, then jumped into his car and drove off. A short time later, the car appeared on Stonyhurst Road, where Martin happened to be sitting on a low wall outside Suzanne's house. He tried to jump out of the way as Bates drove up to him at speed, but he was dragged under the wheels and suffered catastrophic injuries. Bates himself called 999 after the collision, telling the operator, "We've had an argument and I've run him over. Need to send someone quick, I've done the crime." Mr Benson told the courts that Bates had no convictions for violence, but did have 2 convictions for drink driving and 1 for being drunk and disorderly. Bates' defence barrister, Andrew Haslam KC, said that Bates worked at the Whitechapel Centre in Liverpool helping homeless people find accommodation. He said that the man was thought of as kind and considerate by his family and work colleagues, and that the offence was out of character. In a statement read to the court on her behalf, Susan said the sight of her brother dying on the road would haunt her forever. Quote, "I have lived and breathed these horrific images every day for the last 6 months, and I still don't believe it." Referring to Bates, she said, "I don't recognise the person I knew and loved, and I will forever regret the day I allowed him into my life." Unquote. A statement from their mother, Susan, described her son as a beautiful soul. Martin's other sister, Natalie, read her statement, telling the court that her brother's death had left the family traumatised and broken. Bates had pleaded guilty to manslaughter but was convicted of murder by a jury at Liverpool Crown Court in November 2025. On the 28th of November 2025, he got life with a minimum of 18 years.
Now you're back on British soil. There's been a warrant issued by Chelmsford Magistrates Court in relation to the murder of Robert Powell. So therefore I'm arresting you under that warrant on suspicion of murder. Okay? You don't have to say anything, but it may have made offence. Don't mention when questions later on in court. Anything you do say may be given evidence. And the time is 20:43.
The very day when 41-year-old Temitope Adeyinka, who comes from Stratford, East London, was sentenced for manslaughter, even though he didn't lay a finger on his victim, I'll soon explain why he was still convicted of manslaughter, was the very day when his victim, Robert Powell, would have turned 55. It was the 13th of November 2025. Father of 3 and grandfather of 2, Robert Powell, 50, was shot 7 times as he left a house in Roydon near Harlow in Essex on the 13th of June 2020 at the end of a party. He suffered 15 wounds from the 7 shots outside Hill's house in Water Lane, Roydon at 4:47 a.m. on the 13th of June. He died the following day in hospital. The bullets were fired from a 9mm Luger semi-automatic pistol, and 1 bullet knocked the gold grille from his mouth. His 2 adult sons were with him at the time, prosecutor Justin Rouse KC remarking at trial that, quote, "It must have been a terrifying spectacle to witness," unquote. Robert managed musicians, including rapper Depraved, who had a top 10 track with Stormzy. If Adeyinka didn't shoot him dead, who did? I can't trace the reasons for the animosity that drug dealer and career criminal Nana Opong, 45, harboured towards Robert, but that same animosity was shared by fellow drug dealer Isra Shah, 41. But at trial, the judge said that the fact that Shah and Opong were both drug dealers gave them a live motive to murder Robert, and that's all I can tell you about the motive. In other words, basically nothing, except that it was very probably, according to the judge, drug-related. Having 9 previous convictions, on getting out of prison in December 2019, 5 or 6 months before the murder of Robert Powell, Adeyinka turned his back on drug dealing. However, he had since become a close friend of none other than Opong. That said, while he was undoubtedly aware that Opong had it in for Robert, he only found out about Opong's plans to attack the man on the day that the murder took place. At about 1:30 a.m. on the morning of the 13th of June, when Opong learnt of the location of the party that Robert had gone to, Opong, Shah and Adeyinka all drove north as part of a team that was assembling itself, the members being spread across a Ford Cougar and a Vauxhall Zafira. By the time they arrived at the party, according to the prosecution, Adeyinka was fully aware that Robert was to be attacked, but didn't necessarily know that a gun was to be used in the planned attack, meaning that he didn't necessarily know that the planned attack was intended to be fatal. Adeyinka's knowing and willing role, however, was, with Shah, to act as a lookout for Robert and tell the other team members where the man was, which is exactly what both he and Shah did. After the murder of Robert Powell, Adeyinka legged it out of the country and managed to dodge the police for years. His luck ran out in May 2024 though, when he was arrested while in hiding out in Malaga, South Spain. This was the same month in which Opong got life with a minimum of 38 years for Robert's murder, while Shah got life with a minimum of 26 years for the murder.
The magistrates at Chelmsford Magistrates Court have issued a warrant for your arrest, and that's in relation to a murder, possession of a firearm with intent to endanger life, and wounding with intent.
Just confirm your name for me.
Isra Shah.
Cool. Isra Shah. Time's 2 minutes to 4. Okay, you're under arrest for first instance warrant relating to the murder of Robert Powell.
In the law of England and Wales, an accomplice to a crime can be treated like the principal offender and suffer the same criminal penalties as the principal offender. This is why Shah, who, like Adeyinka, didn't physically attack Robert in any way, was no less convicted of murder. He got a much less sentence than Opong though, so presumably Opong was the one who pulled the trigger. I believe that Adeyinka escaped a murder conviction because, unlike Opong and Shah, he didn't necessarily know, as I mentioned earlier, that the plan was to go as far as killing Robert. As Adeyinka's conviction is for manslaughter, the judge had a choice about giving him a life sentence, unlike with a murder conviction, and he chose not to give him one such sentence, but still gave him 19 years. Whether Adeyinka will have to do the full sentence, time will tell. A sentence for manslaughter, you see, usually comes with the possibility of early release in exchange for an extended licence period. Adeyinka was sentenced you know when at Woolwich Crown Court.
What's the phone? What's the phone? Drop the phone now! Drop it! Drop the phone! Get your arms out now! Get your arms out! You're under arrest for murder! You're under arrest for murder! Get your arm out! Got that arm out!
On the 4th of June 2024, 23-year-old Awad Abdel Samad stabbed to death 19-year-old Mohammed Abdi in Edgware Road, central London. The murder was carried out in front of numerous passers-by. Samad believes that Abdi had been involved in the kidnap and torture of a friend of his 2 days before, and he took the chance to exact revenge. To be exact, on the 2nd of June, the defendant's friend, by defendant I of course mean Samad, Sufian Chafi, was kidnapped and tortured, with footage of the attack posted on social media showing him, quote, naked and humiliated, unquote. There was evidence that Mr. Abdi was involved with Sufian's horrendously violent ordeal and, importantly, Samad and his co-defendant Mohammed Mahmoud El-Hazar, 27 from Westminster, who was only convicted of attempting to pervert the course of justice, both believed that he was. The incident on the 4th of June involved the occupants of 2 cars who knew each other and were heading in the same direction in heavy traffic. Samad was in the front passenger seat of a Seat Leon, which was being driven by El-Hazar. The victim, Mr. Abdi, was driving a Porsche Cayenne, which he pulls close up behind the defendant's car, behind Samad's car, flashing his lights. Both cars stopped and Samad got out of the vehicle with a knife. Prosecutor Bill Emlyn Jones KC told the court, "It is, you might have thought, like something from the Wild West." Mohammed Abdi clearly saw Samad coming and got out. The 2 men then started to fight. Mohammed Abdi was also armed with a knife. But within a few seconds of the start of their fighting, Samad gained a crucial advantage. He swung a kick and managed to kick Mohammed Abdi's knife out of his hand onto the road. So that meant that now only one of them had a knife, Samad. The disarmed victim then tried to get back into his Porsche, but was chased by Samad, who reached him before Abdi shut the car door. Samad then stabbed Mr. Abdi 3 times, including once in the chest, which went through the cartilage of the ribs and into the heart. During sentencing, Judge Lynn Tayton said, "You acted with extreme aggression and persistence in attacking Mr. Abdi. I am satisfied that this was a revenge attack and you acted as part of a group. It took place on a congested street where there were many people in vehicles and on foot. You can see how terrifying this was to members of the public." In a victim impact statement read out in court, Mr. Abdi's mother, Sharon, and his sister, Amira, described Mohammed Abdi as a cherished son and a loving brother, and also as a young man who had much to live for. On the 13th of November 2025 at the Old Bailey, Samad got life with a minimum of 27 years.
I'm Detective Chief Inspector Tom Woodward of South Yorkshire Police's Major Crime Unit. I was a Senior Investigating Officer for the murder of Sheldon Jameson. Recently, at Sheffield Crown Court, Jason Hale was sentenced to life imprisonment for Sheldon's murder.
Of the 2 stabbings that 37-year-old Jason Hale, who comes from Doncaster in the East Riding of Yorkshire, carried out in September 2024, one was fatal. The perpetrator armed himself with a knife before fatally attacking Sheldon Jameson, 42, in an alleyway on the 19th of September 2024. The man had also stabbed another man in the exact same location, in the exact same circumstances, on the 17th of September, but that man had survived and he later gave evidence. CCTV footage showed Hale loitering around the alleyway on the nights of both attacks, leading to him being referred to during the trial as the lurker in the shadows. Sentencing Hale, recorder Jeremy Richardson KC told the court that while the 37-year-old claimed that he had acted in self-defence on both occasions, the fact that he had committed strikingly similar attacks over the course of 2 days and the fact that the victim's injuries were so forceful meant that that suggestion was fanciful. And also, the judge pointed out that Mr. Jameson, the one who died, was unarmed. Mr. Richardson, the judge, told Hale that the CCTV doesn't reveal a man acting in fear. The evidence is compelling. You have an easy way with knives and the two attacks are almost identical. The court had also heard that Hale had tried to dispose of a knife in his toilet and another knife was found in his jogging bottoms after he had been arrested. It emerged during the trial that Hale had previously threatened Mr. Jameson and others, warning that he would blade them up. Hale had been under the influence of drugs during the attacks and was possibly attempting to buy more. During the sentencing hearing, Mr. Richardson told Hale, "The backdrop to this appalling criminality is drug taking and drug peddling. It underpins so much criminality in our country and it unquestionably formed the backdrop to your serious violence." Prosecutor Charlotte Baines read out a victim impact statement from Mr. Jameson's father, whose name is Gordon, in which he said his son was kind-hearted despite his struggles with drugs. "I will never recover from the news that Sheldon was murdered. He comes from a big family, so it has affected a lot of people." That was a statement from Gordon, Mr. Jameson's father. And Gordon also said, quote, "He was not just an addict, he was only 42 and will never get married or have children now. Sheldon was not just my son, he was my best friend," unquote. On the 20th of November 2025 at Sheffield's Crown Court, Hale, of no fixed abode, got life with a minimum of 23 years. He was also jailed for 8 years for attempted robbery and 9 years for wounding with intent to cause GBH, both those sentences to run concurrently with his life sentence. If this video has gripped you, I recommend you to watch this one next. I'll meet you there.